Well, they're going to have to try and make the running. Mitterrand and Kohl got on terribly well. Chirac has made more nationalist noises, and of course he's a Gaullist rather than a socialist. But nevertheless, I think that the interests of France are very, very strongly tied up with Germany, and French policy is not really going to change basically. The real problem is to see whether they will wait for an election in Britain in the hope that British policy might change.
Cohesion is very much on the agenda, re-establishing the cohesion of Europe as if it was ever there. What is the health of European cohesion at the moment, at a time when they can't agree on fish, and they can't agree more seriously on the former Yugoslavia?
Well, former Yugoslavia is not really part of the European Union. It's a
no, but there ought to be a coherent attitude.
Oh, there should be, indeed. And we should have the machinery to establish it. That's why Maastricht is so important. Establish some sort of better coordination policy, and it's been suggested by many people, including actually myself, that there should be really works, like the Commission, to propose policies together.
Richard May, thank you very much indeed. The hostage crisis in the news over the last week or so. It's provoked anxious discussions in Western councils to avoid casualties among the peacekeepers or a humiliating reverse for the United States. Russian troops are among those the Bosnian Serbs, but the public response go than elsewhere. In the final part of our series on public opinion and the Bosnian crisis, Andrew Harding reports on the muted reaction in Russia to the plight of the UN hostages.
Pravda, the oldest newspapers, rarely misses a chance to lecture President Yeltsin's government. But the latest crisis in Bosnia seems to have slipped by almost unnoticed. Of course we worry about the situation as editor, but we've got so many other domestic problems to deal with at the moment to think about Bosnia. There are a number among the UN officials being held hostage by the Serbs. Unlike the British, though, their fate has not provoked any major public outcry back home. Russia's close relationship. Russian volunteers fighting alongside their others. They say they're honouring centuries of cultural Orthodox Slavs of Serbia and Russia. Many Russian politicians have championed the same cause. The ultranationalist leader, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, as usual, trying to steal the limelight. As for President Yeltsin, the Bosnian Serbs' latest actions have proved something of an embarrassment for him. The Russian Foreign Ministry is now trying to use its close ties with Belgrade and Pale in order to secure the hostages' release. The word divisions, whatever its relationship to peaceful solution. Andrew Harding, BBC News, Moscow.
And more, of course, on that story, and indeed a dimension which broke on this programme just a few minutes or so ago, the news that the Bosnian Serbs had agreed. It was reported hostages that they had been keeping. I'm joined on the line now from Pale by our correspondent Tom Carver. Is that what you've heard, Tom?
Yes, I've just been speaking to the head of the International Committee, the Red Cross, here in Pale only a few moments ago, and he said that he had been informed by Nikola Koljevic, the Bosnian Serb vice president, that all hostages would be freed within the next 48 hours, so either today or tomorrow.
Are there any conditions attached to this release?
Well, it appears not, because apparently Mr. Koljevic said that they would be freed, quote, as a gesture of goodwill, which would seem to mean it is a unilateral gesture without any sort of preconditions. Though, of course, at the moment, we have no idea what sort of a deal, if any, has been made behind the scenes.
Little early to speculate, but is this a cave-in to the racking up of the military operations that have been suggested and have been indeed in operation by Britain, France and the United States?
Well, if it is, the Bosnian Serbs are certainly never going to admit this. They're obviously going to try to milk it for all the good publicity that they can get to show them up in a good light. But I think it's very unlikely that they will not, that they will have freed these hostages without some sort of concession or some sort of guarantee, because After all, if you remember, the very reason that they took them and went down this very dangerous course of action was to stop the NATO airstrikes. Now, we don't know whether they have yet.
Do we yet know? I mean, as you say, we only have sketchy details. They're going to be released either in the next 24 or 48 hours. What is the mechanism going to be? Is there a place where they're going to be handed over, or what? Or is it too early to say?
Well, it's a bit too early. I think I did ask Monsieur Fiefner, the head of the ICRC, about that. He said that he hadn't any of the details whatsoever. He even said that he didn't, or his delegation didn't expect to be involved in it. He seemed to think that the Bosnian Serbs would just simply allow all the hostages to go from wherever they are being placed at the moment.
Tom Carver in Pale, thank you very much indeed. And now over to the business news with Rob Butler.
David, thank you very much indeed. In a speech he's delivering in Madrid about now, the US Secretary of State is calling for closer ties between the European Union and the North Atlantic Free Trade Area. International commerce is now divided between ever larger groupings of trade blocs. A transatlantic agreement would pave the way for cooperation between even more of them. Janet Barry reports.
The USA's ongoing dispute with Japan over car imports is hardly a ringing endorsement of existing free trade agreements. The US Secretary of State is today likely to push US trade policy a step further by outlining the creation of one single trading bloc stretching from the Pacific coast to the eastern borders of the European Union. British exporters believe the idea is the logical extension of international policy as it stands now and have given it a... But British exporters will have to be Atlantic Free Trade Area, ironing out differences between the United States and Europe in areas like agriculture. Even then, its competence would lie for some observers, though, the free trade a heavy hidden agenda.
The principal motivation isn't economic at all, it's primarily political or strategic. I mean, the fact is that the Transatlantic alliance has become very badly unravelled over the last few years. Disagreements about Yugoslavia, and the lack of purpose in the end of the Cold War period. And I think what we're seeing here, to a degree, is applying a bit of economic sticking plaster to a broader relationship that's coming unstuck.
The United States is looking more favourably towards strengthening economic ties to it as the path towards wealth creation. The recent economic crisis in Mexico has unsettled NAFTA. Are likely to spark enthusiasm in the US Congress. The Transatlantic Free Trade Area is an ambitious plan that may never fulfill its promise.
That's all from me for now. More business news hour. That's in about 90 minutes. David.
Thanks, Rob. Price of old bone seems to be rocketing. It's cost $10 million and has taken 3 years to organise now the world's newest dinosaur exhibit. It's about to open. The display at the American Museum of Natural History is trying to put a new perspective on dinosaurs. As Brian Barron reports, it's a balance between Jurassic Park-style entertainment and a...
For over a century, this enormous museum has been a 3 years, the prize fossils have been boxed up as snazzy new 20th century homes were prepared. The skeletons were the treasure brought back generations ago. Expeditions to the remote corners of the Gobi Desert has yielded up a host of secrets. So too the Rocky Mountains. Now the mammoth task of recasting the dinosaurs is over, aided by a squad of metal sculptors. Montana. These
down and its tail out behind it as a counterbalance, much more analogous to the way a bird runs, because the closest living relatives to the Tyrannosaur
but these dinosaurs are ultimate.
perhaps it was something to do with the change in the climatic conditions. Speaking of which, here's the weather news with Suzanne Charlton.
Midweek, the cyclist caused chaos. It was Thursday. Fall, in fact, over one of the high and an avalanche meant that higher peaks of the Alps are in deep snow still at the moment. Even of that cloud far through Friday have been around the Adriatic coast in the by very thundery weather indeed. The area through the weekend though. Sunshine for most of the beaches in the Mediterranean, but out of the northwest changes afoot as cloud and rain roll. Pressure rolls thundery and wind way northeastwards through Japan. We've also got some very disturbed weather in the Philippines. Tropical storm. You may move up the ends of it to affect the beginning of next week. Around this, otherwise, sun. The other big tropical heavy shower for the subcontinent. Sunshine in the north, dry and sunny weather for large parts of the Middle East, only across more northern areas. The northern areas hot around Toru regions, fine at the moment in South Africa, but a little.
Suzanne Charlton, thank you very much. You're watching NewsDesk on Friday, June the 2nd, a week in which the world watched the events unfold in Bosnia with increasing alarm. The current crisis began last Thursday when NATO launched airstrikes after the Bosnian Serbs ignored a warning to return heavy weapons seized from the UN. The Serbs retaliated. 71 people were killed. On Friday, another UN deadline lapses and more airstrikes were launched. The Serbs again responded, this time by taking hostage nearly 300 UN personnel. The action caught the international community by surprise and a flurry of diplomatic talks ensued. The contact group of nations demanded the unconditional release of the hostages. NATO foreign ministers agreed to strengthen reinforcements in Bosnia. Britain responded by sending in a heavily armed contingent of troops. Britain and France began to map out a strategy for rapid reaction forces. But there's growing dissent at the United Nations on the way ahead in Bosnia. And just in this last hour, news that the UN hostages will be released by the Bosnian Serbs either today or on Saturday. The International Committee of the Red Cross in Geneva told World NewsDesk that the Bosnian Serbs are prepared to release the peacekeepers as a gesture of goodwill. We'll obviously keep you up to date with all the latest developments from Bosnia, but that's all for today from BBC World NewsDesk. Sue Carpenter will be back with a full bulletin of world news after the break. Meanwhile, goodbye.
This is BBC World, the BBC's international news channel.
Hello, I'm Sue Carpenter with the BBC World News. Headlines: the Bosnian Serbs say they'll release the UN peacekeeping hostages they've been holding. As the United Nations Security Council begins its discussions on Bosnia, Britain and France are at odds with Boutros Ghali. And China's Prime Minister is accused of increasing repression ahead of the 6th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square. Release all the UN peacekeeping hostages today or tomorrow. The announcement was made through the International Committee of the Andrea Pesco, President. Releases will be made of goodwill. Earlier, correspondent in Parliament Carver told David Jessel the Bosnians denied it was a cave-in.
The Bosnian Serbs are certainly never going to admit this. They're obviously going to try to milk it for all the good publicity that they can get to show them up in a good light. But I think it's very unlikely that they will not, that they will have freed these hostages without some sort of concession, some sort of guarantee, because after all, if you remember, the very reason that they took them and went down this very dangerous course of action was to stop the NATO airstrikes. Now, we don't know whether they have any sort of guarantee on that as yet.
Do we yet know? I mean, as you say, we only have sketchy details. They're going to be released either in the next 24 or 48 hours. What is the mechanism going to be? Is there a place where they're going to be handed over, or what? Too early to say?
Well, it's a bit too early. I think I did ask Monsieur Fifner, the head of the ICRC, about that. He said that he hadn't been informed of any of the details whatsoever. He even said that he didn't, or his delegation didn't expect to be involved in it. He seemed to think that the Bosnian Serbs would just simply allow all the hostages to go from wherever they are being placed at the moment.
The announcement by the Red Cross. The UN Security Council continued discussions on the future role of the UN force in Bosnia. Britain and France are already moving to reinforce their troops, but the Secretary-General has suggested that the UN force in Bosnia should be scaled down or replaced by a multinational force under a new command.
Everybody can see where they're going. They're not so sure what they're going for. There's not much doubt about the military capability of the task force. Is what it should be used for. As the UN Security Council begins discussing a new mandate for the peacekeeping operation in Bosnia, significant differences have emerged. The Secretary-General, Dr. Boutros Ghali, says the UN should either restrict itself to a conventional, neutral peacekeeping operation, or else it should hand the operation to a multinational force for action against the Serbs. The British and the French want just to expand the existing force.
I'm sure that we will not favour the creation of a multinational force whose job is to go in there and fight the war against the Bosnian Serbs.
I don't think the Bosnians need truck drivers. They need those who, in fact, will use force if necessary. Number one, to deliver humanitarian assistance, and number two, to perform the basic mandate now of defending the safe areas.
The fear is that the crisis over the hostages could tempt the Security Council to make hasty decisions. Decisions that could damage both the long-term future of the UN operation in Bosnia and of UN peacekeeping as a whole. John Lyon, BBC News.
The human rights group Amnesty International has accused China of growing repression and human rights abuses over the past year. The allegations are in a report released shortly before Sunday's 6th anniversary of the crushing of the pro-democracy protests in Tiananmen Square. It comes as China continues a campaign of arrests against political dissidents.
6 years on from the Tiananmen Square demonstrations, and the Chinese Communist Party is showing that its policies against protest haven't changed. The same men run the government, and it's believed that the Prime Minister, Li Peng, has taken personal charge of the current campaign against dissidents. For their part, a series of petitions for freedom. Official protests as a counter-revolutionary rebellion and have imprisoned thousands of heart. Police harassment and arrest. Activists have issued several petitions in recent weeks. Human rights groups say the 50 political activists have been arrested in recent weeks, and the authorities appear to be on edge as the 6th anniversary of June protests. John Cornford, BBC News.
European Union foreign ministers are taking part in ceremonies on the island of Sicily today to mark the 40th anniversary of a conference which led to the birth of the present-day union. Our correspondent Clive Marden is there and takes up the story.
In Messina, a day which began with a rainstorm, Europe's past and its future meet. It was here in June 40 years ago that the 6 steel community decided to form an economic bloc. Tomorrow, just a few miles down the road, the 15 members of the modern European Union will be reconsidering its political future. And for the occasion, the town has been painting on its European credentials. A little artistic touching up, just to remind people that this is where the path to the modern European Union began. Back at Messina Town Hall, they're pursuing the floral theme. Thousands of roses specially flown in from Genoa. It's a matter of civic pride that Europe's leaders should return to the town where the principles were people, goods and capital to be enshrined in the Treaty of Rome. The Maastricht Treaty on European Union was a masterpiece of fudge and compromise. As they gather in Messina to nod to the past before tackling the future, Europe's senior politicians face a tough task, hammering out a blueprint to take the European Union into the next century. Key issues include extending majority voting in policy areas like foreign affairs, strengthening the role of the European Parliament, and curbing the use of the national veto.
I believe the choice of holding the conference in Messina, in the south of Italy, is a significant one. This may seem a selfish choice, but for once, the self-interest of the European Union is a good thing for the south of Italy. In fact, selfishness is on the decrease. Allontanato sempre più l'Europa dal sud e il sud dall'Europa stanno cadendo.
But in the streets and cafes in this Mediterranean port, the local
Not in favor of a united Europe. I think everyone should speak their own language and stay within their own borders. The French should speak French, the Italians Italian, and speak their own language.
The Intergovernmental Conference has to plot a course between the federalist Germans, France's faith in the nation state, and British concerns for its jealously guarded national sovereignty. This is the first of many meetings of the reflection group, depending on who you believe. Those could chart a whole new direction.
Campaigning is in full swing. The Prime Minister, Chuan Lee, has pledged to stamp out the traditional practice of vote buying. Some of Thailand's richest men are running for office, and all have denied money to influence the outcome.
Running an election campaign is an expensive business, as Prime Minister Chuan Lee knows well. But an expense is traditionally the cost of candidates and votes. After being forced to call the election as the result of a land reform scandal, Chuan Lee says he's looking for a clean fight.
There's a lot of professionals entering politics today, which is good. But if we see them achieving success by using their money, that is very dangerous.
Who's taken over leadership of the Palang Dharma party. That he underhand pay. Farmers Bank estimates that the election will cost the various parties $700 million, and much of it will be purchasing people.
The vote buying is because
the links between big money and politicians bring other problems too. At least 3 leading candidates have been denied visas to visit the United States because Washington believes they're linked to drugs trafficking. It's not only the Thais who have a keen interest in seeing who forms the next government. Terry Benson, BBC News.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, the Bosnian Serbs have announced that they intend to release all the UN hostages. Joining me from Geneva is Pierre Gauthier, who's a spokesman for the International Committee of the Red Cross. Thank you very much for joining us. No doubt, then, the Serbs have promised to free all the UN hostages.
So, in fact, I can confirm you that I was in contact with my colleague Andreas Pifner in Palais 1 hour ago, and he confirmed me that coming from the IS authorities, the Bosnian Serb authorities, they said that the UN members should be released in the next few days. So we are still waiting on the confirmation.
You haven't been able to get a clear idea of exactly when they will be released?
No, at this stage not, unfortunately, and if we've not well understood the statement of the IS authorities in Palais, I think we'll continue, and I'm sure we'll continue to request access to these people, because they should be provided with the protection of the Third Geneva Convention.
Do you know whether the Bosnian Serbs have given any preconditions for the release?
You know, we are a strictly independent and humanitarian organization, so we are not involved in negotiations at this political level. The only target of the RCRC is to bring protection to the victims and also assistance, and it's specifically the case in the case of the UN members currently held by the Bosnian Serbs.
So was the ICRC responsible for any negotiation with the Bosnian Serbs?
You know, we don't negotiate as such. We are just working.
You didn't have any quiet, private talks?
Yes, we have, since the beginning of the crisis, in fact, we have been in contact with all the parties involved. I mean, both UNPROFOR and the Palais authorities, in order to try to solve the humanitarian issue. And the humanitarian issue for us is very clear. We have to gain access to these people, we have to provide them with a certain level of protection, and we have to be sure that the Geneva Convention provisions are respected, especially the Article 13, I'm sorry to be a little bit technical, and also the Article 23. That means that all the detainees have to be kept outside of any risky area, such as a strategical site, for example.
So are all the hostages being bussed to a certain place where they will then be taken over by you, as it were?
I'm sorry, but I cannot answer your question. First, we've not gained access to these people, and at a second point, we have no information about the practicalities linked to their potential release. So you can be sure that in all the cases, we'll follow the case very, very carefully in order to be able necessary to make necessary steps in order to gain access to these people rapidly.
Pierre Gauthier, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
And just to recap, the Bosnian Serbs have intend to release all the UN hostages. More details, of course, as we get it, but that's all from this room for the moment.
Less than 3 weeks ago, the UN withdrew from Somalia, leaving warring factions to fight out a big war. Correspondent Jane Stanley is the first the UN's departure. But can the optimism of the Somali people prevent the rival clans from destroying this fragile peace? And in the run-up to the Polish presidential elections, Lech Wałęsa talks exclusively to Tim Sebastian, why he feels abandoned by the people he freed from communism. Correspondent reports from Poland and from Somalia at these times on BBC World.
Youthful lust, abstain from sexual immorality.
The church controls every aspect of your life.
What experience?
Examining the ethical and spiritual issues of the 90s, Everyman, Friday on BBC World. From India, the latest business news.
Buying a car on credit, once shunned by Indians, it's questionable. A big name from the United States comes calling for $1 billion. Can a survivor of the Gulf War provide power to the Indian people? Is the record share price rise spectacular or speculative?
India Business Report. Sunday at these times on BBC World.
Exploring another moral issue now on BBC World, Everyman.
To call anorexia the slimmers disease is to trivialise it most unfairly. It implies vain little girls who are thinking about their looks and, you know, have overshot on slimming and have, you know, accidentally overdone it. And it doesn't do justice to the intense seriousness with which they are actually trying to do the right thing, to try and be... even good is too small a word. I want to say righteous with all the sort of Old Testament prophetic overtones.
I've always wanted to do well, and you can never be good enough. I felt, yes, good that I wasn't eating anything, and I felt good that I wasn't letting myself eat something. It was like a punishment. I would have liked it, but I wouldn't let myself. I wasn't good enough to eat.
I was terrifically hungry, but in a way I felt more elated and more powerful when I was hungry and didn't eat. That gave me a high. If I could be hungry and not eat, that was really powerful.
A good day would be if I maybe ate 2 tiny little bowls of all bran with hot water in it during the day, and then I would be sick after that. I mean, literally small amount. And I would bring as much, you know, all of that up, and then that would be a good day. I feel like I'd achieved something that day.
I think it's what society puts on them. If you show pictures, people of various shapes, to children as young as 6, and say, tell me what you think this person is like, they will look at the thin pictures and say they are, you know, attribute virtuous remarks like hard-working or sensible or careful. And they will look at the fat people and say sloppy, indulgent, bad, greedy, lazy. The equation is instinctive in society now. Yes, take the boots off. Usual thing. On the floor or on the machine, as you know. Yeah, it's all right. That's right. That's it exactly, thank you. When yesterday you went out, you said somebody asked you to, offered you a drink and you had to take it. What was it?
Just half a lager.
And you wanted to say no?
Yeah, desperately. And she just put me in such an awkward position because I was sort of wedged in the corner that I just had to drink it.
And what did you feel
I just felt so panicked today because of getting weight, and I just felt terrible.
What did you think that drinking half a pint of lager last night would do to your weight this morning?
I just thought it was going to go up. Well, tons, but...
How much did you think it
about £1 or something?
That's not actually
got biological basis, in fact, has it? I mean, the number of calories in a lager isn't going to put your weight up or anything like that. It's part of the hobgoblin, the anorexic hobgoblin that kind of yatters in your ear telling you things that aren't true, that makes you feel this enormous sort of horrendous consequences going to come from this very small action.
It's also because she put me in that position and it wasn't my choice to do it, and I just stuck there.
But you've gone out, I mean, you've gone out to have a drink with people.
Yeah.
So she bought you a drink?
Yeah.
Very ordinary.
Yeah.
Lisa is out of hospital and not dying, but she's got really the whole of recovery still to do. She was tube-fed in hospital and came out of hospital on 4 cartons of liquid nourishment a day, and she's still been surviving on that, but the battle has been to keep her taking 4. Her tendency is to cut down to 3 and then feel that's too much and cut down again. To prevent her going back again has been hard work. She's trying now to put the first solids in regularly, and it is a monumental battle to keep even 1 slice of bread and 1 piece of fruit a day. We've been struggling and concentrating on that for the past month, and we still haven't got it in reliably. And every time she does it, she feels guilty and horrible.
I was thin. I put on weight since we married because I ate like my husband, except I put on weight and he didn't. So I decided I'd go on a diet. I was teaching at the time, maths, secondary school, and there was about 6 of us decided to go on a diet together. And I started off just perfectly normally. Thought I'd lose about 3/4 of a stone or a stone, but it didn't work like that. What I actually found was I was actually very good at it. I was actually better than the others. And somehow that seemed to get a grip on me. I could lose my 2 pounds every week. And they said, oh, I've had gooseberry pie for Sunday lunch. Isn't that dreadful? And I'd feel terrifically virtuous because I hadn't. I guess I'd always had something of a competitive spirit around. And here was a new arena where I could do better than other people. But the thing that really began to sort of get a hold was everything would have to be low calorie, or slim as butter, or all the sort of anything that I thought had a lot of calories in it. Salad dressing, all that had to either be cut out or very low calorie stuff. And I could tell you, I can't tell you now, but I could tell you then all the calorific values of everything down to 2 peanuts. My sister described me as an Oxfam bag of bones. And I thought that was ridiculous.
I know the essentials of what I know from my first 4 or 5 months. 20 years ago, I started working for Professor Morgan, and he told me anorexia is a kind of adolescent difficulty. We don't understand it, but if you can keep them alive, they usually get better. And in the meantime, you can ease their misery by talking to them. And that was a wonderful brief. For the first 6 months, I did the same as all 4 previous registrars had done. I expected each one to gain weight. I pushed her to get better, concentrated only, ignored the side of her that was frightened of getting heavier. At the end of the first 6 months, I realized weight gain alone wasn't the cure and wasn't going to be the cure. They needed to change their minds. So I started to explore with them what they could change to help them challenge bit by bit their habits and gradually soften their rules about what they shouldn't do. See how the weight's doing today. Usual thing, shoes off. Nothing in the pocket. Cardigan, I'll take it. That's only settling at 5 and 9.5. No. Considering this machine weighs half a pound, that's alarming. That's only 5 9.5.
I was nurse training in London. I went through a bad patch, really. Got quite depressed, lost my appetite. I had exams coming up, and a relationship broke up. And I think it was a lot of things together. I'm just going to take your temperature and your blood pressure. And gradually, over about 6 months, I lost about 2. Was admitted a couple of times.